You're interested in playing the Middle-earth strategy battle game, and you aren't sure which army to start with. Well, let's figure it out together and get you a battle-ready army to start crushing your opponents with. My name is Jacob Lucas, and welcome to Conquest Creations. There are a lot of options in Middle-earth, and I really mean a lot. There are 42 regular factions, 35 legendary legions, plus the options to make alliances. The amount of different possible armies that you can make is staggering and can be a bit overwhelming. But don't worry, we're going to break it down and make it simple. In this video, we're going to be breaking down how to actually build an army, which armies are the easiest and hardest to learn the game with, then which armies are the most accessible and cheapest to build, how to write your first army list, and then finally we're going to be going through my 5 recommendations for the best beginner armies. Now, before we get into all that, my main piece of advice to new players is to choose the army that excites you the most and the one that you like the look of. It's just going to be more fun using models and characters that you're passionate about. That being said, if there isn't one that instantly jumps out at you and you want a little bit more advice than just pick what's cool, watch this video. All right, firstly, let's look at how you make an army so we know what you are trying to build. In Middle-earth, force organization is really relaxed, which is one of my favorite parts of the game. There is no need for HQ and 3 troop squads, and you're never limited on elites. Every model is an individual, there's no squads. You have heroes and you have troops. And typically, you'll need 1 hero per 12 troops. And heroes are only able to lead the troops of their own faction. Good armies are able to ally with good armies, and evil armies can ally with evil armies. There's 3 tiers of alliances: green, yellow, and red. Green alliances are ones that we saw exactly in the pages of the books or on screen, and they have no restrictions at all. Yellow alliances are ones that are, in theory, possible, but we didn't see in the story, and you have to have heroes of a certain heroic tier to lead your armies, and you'll lose your army bonus. You can also do red alliances, which are impossible allies that are not possible in any form of the story. Now, you can do this, but there's significant downsides, and really it's just there so that if you ever want to, you can play with all of your collection together in one legal army. Now, aside from alliances, there's also legendary legions. These are army lists that represent an exact moment from the story, such as Theoden's charge at the Pelennor or the last stand of the heroes at the Black Gate. These are great for bringing theme and competitive play together. Theme is a huge topic when building an army. Lots of players choose to have their armies perfectly create an exact moment from the story. To start out with, I would definitely recommend a regular army without a legendary legion or an alliance. This will give you the most options, and it'll be the simplest to learn the rules with. The good thing is, in the future, you can slot into alliances or legendary legions really easily. All right, now let's look at what armies we should choose based on how easy or hard they are to learn the rules with. Middle-earth is always described as easy to learn but hard to master. However, some armies are certainly easier than others. On screen now is a diagram of every army split into 3 categories of how easy they are to learn. Importantly, this is not a measure of how strong they are, just how complicated they are. I would highly recommend that you go for one in the easy, or to stretch, the medium camp. And if you want to go for one of the harder ones, I'd recommend choosing it as your second faction after you get a grip of the core rules. It's going to be a lot more fun to play games where you can just focus on playing the game instead of being bogged down by complicated special rules and weird playstyles. For beginners, I recommend an army that is a moderately high model count, is mainly infantry, and is relatively durable, so it has a high defense. As a beginner, you're going to want to get a solid understanding of the core rules before you get into models that use the more advanced rules. You're also going to make a ton of tactical errors that are going to put you in tough spots, so having a high defense and plenty of models means that a small error won't necessarily cost you the game. Armies that rely on unusual mechanics or too heavily on one hero can be tough for your first army. I also wouldn't worry too much about things like magic casters, heaps of cavalry, or monsters. The great thing is that you can add these into your force as it grows. For example, if you decide to play Mordor, I would start with a classic orc horde with some tough heroes like Gothmog. After you've gotten the hang of that, then add in a troll or a rune wraith to learn the next set of mechanics. Feel free to pause the video here to find where I have put the factions that you're most interested in. This video is brought to you by Conquest Creation's collection of wargaming terrain. If you're watching this video right as it's come out, we have a Kickstarter running called the Kingdom of Tor Ithelas. that is a bright and noble city ready to be your battleground. In the Kingdom of Tor Ithlas, you can get every single building either fully intact or ruined as if the battle has already started. We also have a ton of other terrain options such as our Kingdom of Saxonia, the Kingdom of Directdeep, and the Kingdom of Azragor. You can find them all on our website or on the Kickstarter page if it's still running when you're watching this video. Out of all the wargames I've played, the rule set for Middle-earth has the best interactions with terrain where it really matters and it really feels like you're fighting in a city. So I absolutely love making and playing on this terrain. All right, let's get back to the video. All right, let's move into our next section. Some armies are rare, temporarily discontinued, or simply more expensive than other options. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem for everyone, but it is good to keep in mind. Middle-earth armies are typically 20 to 50 models, with some notable outliers, like Goblin Town, who can easily get over 100, or the White Council, who can be as few as 3, or even Smaug, who is an army all on his own. If you're coming from a 40k background, you'll find Middle-earth armies significantly smaller and cheaper to build, which is great when it comes to cost and also to painting. I find that I can build 2 or 3 Middle-earth armies for the cost and painting time of a single 40k army. The Battle Host boxes and the Battle of Ascilius starter kit are both great starting places to get into the game. They're very cost effective and they give you a solid core. The armies in the cheapest section are widely available on the Warhammer website, and you'll be able to start with just a few boxes. When you're starting out, I would recommend getting a pack of your favorite characters and a box of warriors. For example, if I wanted to play Lothlorien, I would start with a box of Galadrim warriors and the Celeborn and Haldir box. This gives you a solid starting point. You can either wait on getting elites, or you can get them straight away. But I'd recommend after a couple games, you can have a look at getting some elite Guard of Galadrim Court and some cavalry just to get yourself started. If you're open to doing a few conversions, this will give you a full army with everything you need. If you like the look of some of the more expensive armies, then buckle up. These armies don't have plastic kits in them, and they will be entirely metal or resin cast. When The Hobbit came out, some of the armies got plastic kits and others got fine cast, while some of the older niche factions were entirely metal. My army of Lake Town that I'm building is a horde of resin and is costing a small fortune. My Far Harad army is entirely metal and has a lot of cavalry, making it even more expensive. Now, I'm happy to get these armies because I'm very experienced in the game, I really like the look of them, and they have a unique playstyle. But I certainly don't recommend them for beginners. For the cost of my army Lake Town, I could have bought 2 or 3 other armies to play the game with. The other thing to consider when purchasing an army is the use of third-party models, typically in the form of 3D prints. Third-party models are widely accepted at almost every single tournament, and for casual games are obviously completely fine. Of the hundreds of Middle-earth tournaments all around the world each year, there may be 10 or so that are Warhammer official. So if you don't live near Warhammer World or one of the Warhammer Championship stores, this isn't something you need to worry too much about. Third-party models are generally a bit cheaper, but usually aren't the exact miniatures of what you see in the movies. Now, I mainly use Warhammer official models, but this is a matter of taste, and going third-party can definitely get you into the game on a lower budget. The second-hand market is also very active, meaning that if you're willing to go second-hand, you can get a full army, generally for pretty cheap. Hopefully you have an idea in mind for what faction you want to choose. Now, let's talk about how to write your first army list. I see a lot of people posting their army lists online asking for feedback, which is great, but I think there are a lot of newer players who fall too deep into the trap of trying to start with a very optimized army. Middle-earth is a game of skill, and your experience will always win out over a slightly better army list, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. I recommend just getting stuck into the game and learning the rules. This will help you understand which units you like and which ones you want to change in your army roster. A game of Middle-earth is usually 300 to 800 points, but I would recommend your first games being just 200 points to learn the game and then growing from there. If you want to write an army list, you can use Tabletop Admiral. I have it linked in the description down below. It gives you rules for your miniatures and is totally free. This isn't sponsored or anything, it's just a great tool that I personally use a lot. Now that we have gone through everything you need to know, let's look at my recommendations for the 5 best beginner armies. Starting out at number 5, we have the Army of the Dead, or more specifically, you can also play it as the Return of the King Legendary Legion. This is basically Aragon, the King of the Dead, and a bunch of ghosts. It's a lower model count army, but you have super high defense and terror, which keeps you safe. Aragon has a free point of might every turn, meaning that you can learn all about heroics. You just need to get 1 box of Army of the Dead Soldiers, the 3 Hunters box, and the King of the Dead box, all of which are plastic kits, making this a great starting point for the game. Now, it can be tough to play against newer players because it uses a lot of terror, so I reckon this one's best if you're joining an experienced community. It's also probably the cheapest way to build a big army. Number 4 is Isengard. They have a solid battle host, which gets you a bunch of troops. From there, you can add in whichever named characters you like, and even get into the Dunlendings if you want to. It's all around solid with decent model count, good hitting power, good shooting, and pikes. It also gives you the core of several legendary legions, which gives you different ways of playing with it down the track. You can bring in Saruman when you're ready to learn about magic, and he is one of the best casters in the game. Number 3 is Gondor. This is a classic place to start. We see them fighting in the movies heaps, and the models are great. You can start with the Battle of Osgiliath box set and the battle host to have a full army. There are a few elite troops to add in as well, and there are a heap of options when it comes to heroes. You can play some of the most iconic themes from the movies without being overwhelmed by having to make tricky plays. It's straightforward, strong, and fun. Number 2 is Mordor. Mordor is one of the most popular factions in-game because it has the most options of all the armies, which means that it can grow as you learn the game. As I said before, you can start with your classic horde of orcs, and as you're comfortable with the basic mechanics, you can then add in a troll or add in a runewraith to learn about monsters and magic when you're ready for it. This also gives you a solid core of orcs that you can use for a Barad-dûr army or an Angmar army, and there are several legendary legions all built around orcs, meaning you will never get bored of having a core of orcs in your collection. Now finally, my number 1 pick for the best beginner army is the Army of Thror. This is a Kingdom of Erebor from the start of the Hobbit movies, and it only has 2 troop choices, but that's all you need because they're both awesome. You can get the box with Thror and Thrain and a box of Grimhammers to have a solid 500 point army. Once you're ready, you can add in Thorin, Dwalin, and Balin and another box of Erebor warriors, and you'll have a solid army that can play at all but the largest of games. You have solid numbers, solid troops, solid heroes, and everything's high defense, so it's hard to kill. It's great to start learning the game with because it's relatively straightforward, but it still has a lot of tactical depth as you learn more and more about it, as you learn about things like two-handing and special striking. Overall, it's actually my favorite faction to play in the game, so I definitely recommend it for you. Now, there's obviously a ton to learn when you're getting into Middle-earth, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below and I will respond to every single one. This has been Conquest Creations, welcome to Middle-earth, and thank you for watching.